Good evening and welcome to our COVID-19 update. I am Ladi Akiridoluale. Here are the highlights at this hour. Domestic flights resume in the country's remaining airports, although some were not so ready. We begin in the nation's aviation sector, where more airports across the country are now open for flight operations after about 3 months of shutdown following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. The airports in Akwa Ibom and Kwara and Kaduna were all open, although those in both Kwara and Kaduna were waiting for certification by the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority. The Benin City Airport in Edo State is yet to fully implement the COVID-19 protocols for travel, while the Akano Ibiam International Airport in Enugu State, which is undergoing rehabilitation, will open on August the 30th.
Ilori Airport in Kwara State, North Central Nigeria. Staff take their seats outside, observing the social distancing rules. Another washes his hands at the facilities provided. Ticket counters in the terminal are empty, but authorities say the airport is ready and roaring to go, but awaits the certification to go ahead.
We are fully prepared, but as the regulation in the aviation industry demands them, and we're expecting them on Friday to come and certify our facility in readiness for the operation. As soon as they certify the airport, we are good to go.
Now to South Nigeria, this time to the Benin Airport in Edo State, where it appears passengers may have to wait a bit longer as the facility is not yet ready for resumption, as work is still in progress and officials not willing to speak. The situation at the Kaduna International Airport in northwest Nigeria is no different, as COVID-19 safety protocols are in place, but the terminal awaits clearance from the regulatory authority.
We needed to put a lot of things in place before we can resume operations. They don't give us approval, of course we cannot open the airport operations.
Now to the Victor Atta International Airport in Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, Southside Nigeria, where activities has picked up with passengers going through temperature checks and the 2-meter social distance.
Quite efficient, quite organized, yes. Of course, it's going to take a bit of getting used to, but I'm sure after a couple of flights, everybody will be on top shape.
The time taken to board an airplane, the time is really the difference. So it takes longer time to do your check-in, takes longer time to screen, takes longer time to do just everything.
And the state-owned carrier taxis away for a flight to Abuja. Now to Southeast Nigeria, specifically Enugu, where the Akano Ibiam International Airport under rehabilitation is located. The Minister of Aviation, Mr. Hadi Sirika, comes calling to assess the level of work. The last stage of pavement wearing course is said to be over 90% complete, and Mr. Sirika is confident of an August 30 opening date.
Fence and road is going on, and other works to ensure that this airport, including airfield lighting, has been delivered for day and night operations. And I'm very confident that this procurement will be delivered on the 30th of August 2020.
Finally, in Lagos, Southwest Nigeria, new destinations like Uyo and Kano have been added to the list of routes being operated by some airlines, while passenger figures remain low.
Industry players in the manufacturing subsector have asked the federal government to retool the manufacturing sector to revive the country to tackle post-COVID-19 challenges. The president of the National Union of Textile, Garment and Tailoring Workers Union of Nigeria, Mr. John Adaji, while noting that the country's economic growth has been unstable with a very slow recovery plan, observes that the effects of the COVID-19 lockdown has further worsened the situation.
The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic across the globe has since presented the gaps in public health management the world over, as government's readiness for a virus outbreak like this has come under public scrutiny. The impacts of the pandemic, however, goes beyond the healthcare effects. There's also the significant economic impacts, which rubs off on the manufacturing industry, positively and negatively. In Nigeria, the manufacturing subsectors with upside in the pandemic are the healthcare-related and distribution firms that have been exposed to some funding opportunities from government.
We applied and we have received the money. And we're already working with the money.
We do sincerely apologize for the mix-up there. That report is by Temple Ashajo and it will be coming later on. Let's go to Kaduna itself, where we had said that industry players in the manufacturing sector have asked the federal government to retool the manufacturing sector to revive the country to tackle post-COVID-19 challenges. The president of the National Union of Textile, Garment and Tailoring Workers Union of Nigeria, Mr. John Adaji, noted that the country's economic growth has been unstable with a very slow economic recovery plan. Let's go from there to Bayelsa State, and Deborah Timiwood has the update.
Bayelsa State is most times referred to as a civil service state because the entrepreneurial sector in the state is not so active. But then there are few entrepreneurs in Bayelsa State, and for them, the era of the coronavirus has been a difficult season. This used to be a fashion house for the production of clothes. But since the onset of the coronavirus in Bayelsa State, they've delved into the production of face masks. This now is their main source of income. The CEO of this company says she can now pay her staff with the production of face masks, but she's still battling with the challenge of getting materials for this production.
Because of the lockdown, the transportation, the way bill is so high, and the main problem is power. Because of electrical, the NEPA, they don't bring light as often, and it's really stressful getting fuel every day.
For Mr. Osita, who manufactures paints in Bayelsa State, he says this period of the coronavirus has negatively impacted on the loan facility he took from the bank.
I borrowed money from the bank to run my business. Just imagine bank putting up all the interest on me to pay, even then when they know that for how many months now you did not have any business to do, and the interests are there lying for you to pay. So how do we do that? I recently heard that government are helping other sectors like agriculture sectors and the rest. I think the production sectors, they should look into our matter.
The directive by the Bayelsa State government that every resident of the state must use a face mask in public will definitely positively impact on their business, as it would mean more sales for these entrepreneurs. From Yenagua, Deborah Timiwood for COVID-19 updates.
Let's quickly check out the COVID-19 figures coming out of the website of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, the NCDC, where 463 new confirmed cases were reported and 121 patients discharged in the last 24 hours. From 199,016 samples tested so far across the country, the total number of confirmed cases is now 33,616. The number of people discharged stands at 13,792, while 754 fatalities have been recorded. This brings the number of active cases to 19,070. After the treatment and discharge of patients, 2 states with no current active COVID-19 cases are Zamfara and Kogi. Looking at states with the lowest number of cases on admissions, Sokoto State has 1, Jigawa has 2, while Yobe and Bauchi State have 3 cases each. The Nigerian Association of Pharmacists and Pharmaceutical Scientists in the Americas, NAFSA, has donated personal protective equipment to the Nigeria Center for Disease Control as members of the association call on government to create an enabling environment for indigenous manufacturing of pharmaceutical products. Speaking at the handover ceremony of the items in Abuja, the representative of NAFSA, Mr. Ali Onoja, says Nigeria has the capacity to manufacture most of the pharmaceutical products that are currently being imported into the country. He asked for stronger synergy with Nigerian pharmacists in the diaspora in order to deepen efforts towards finding indigenous solutions to the country's health challenges.
The outbreak of COVID-19 in the country since February this year has no doubt exposed many frontline health workers to the dangers of being infected with the virus. However, it has also provided many professionals the opportunity to demonstrate their patriotism to their country by way of supporting government's COVID-19 response efforts. The latest of such acts of patriotism is the donation of personal protective equipment to the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, by the Nigerian Association of Pharmacists and Pharmaceutical Scientists in the Americas.
Though in the United States, the heart of NAFSA members remain at home in Nigeria. As we navigate the current global pandemic environment, NAFSA's key message to Nigeria is that they should not let the pandemic go to waste, but rather the lessons from it should inform our decisions going into the future.
We look forward to more of this, and it only shows that whether you're a Nigerian at home or you're a Nigerian in the diaspora, we need to work together to build the best country. And we keep saying that when we hear bad news about Nigeria, that's not who we are. This is who we are. Committed, patriotic, loving your country, and we continue to spread the good news about our country.
The items donated include 10,000 pieces of examination gloves, 1,000 pieces of KN95 face masks, and 1,000 pieces of face shields, among others. While these donations are appreciated by the NCDC, the association highlights the need for further collaboration in other areas.
Just like Chimamanda Adichie says, it's maybe the truth, but it's not the full story. The full story of the Nigerian experience is really how we come together to support ourselves, and really Nigerians in diaspora are a critical part of that architecture.
Apart from supporting the government with the PPEs, and then also all the things that have come in terms of helping the healthcare frontliners, it's also important to use the intellectual base of NAFSA and other organizations in diaspora to promote indigenous growth and development of products, pharmaceutical products, biological products, chemicals, and reagents, so that in situations like this we can be self-sufficient. And that's what the DG also emphasized, that this relationship should not stop at just responding to the crisis. It should continue even in the times of peace.
The Nigeria Center for Disease Control is the lead agency of government in the national response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The agency, however, needs the support of all to win the battle against the virus.
Let's talk now to Dr. Bolaji Balogun, who is a public health physician, and she joins us via Skype from Lekki in Lagos. Thank you for your time and welcome to the program, Dr. Balogun.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Our situation in the country is that we are now at a canter. The numbers are going up fairly rapidly, even though other countries are seeing even sharper rises. Today, we're now at 33,000 plus. The fatalities are also increasing, but also the recoveries are also going up. But the testing numbers are still low, less than 200,000. What do you make of these statistics?
Yes, so we've known that testing is a challenge, and that the more we test, the more cases we'll actually see. So we can say that the numbers we are seeing are clearly an underestimate. And once we are able to commit more resources into testing, we're going to actually see a clearer picture of what is on ground. So sometimes when we say, oh, there are fewer numbers of people, not fewer number of cases per day, it might be a factor of testing. Maybe there were challenges with testing the previous day. So what we're seeing is clearly not a true reflection of what is on ground.
One of the other things that is on ground is the fact that there are far more testing centers, there are far more facilities now available for those who are going to do testing or who want to do testing, both in the public sector and in the private sector. But it doesn't seem as if our people are turning out. I don't want to go into even the issue of non-compliance with the non-pharmaceutical interventions yet. But I mean, if we stick to the issue of testing, why are people not showing up for testing, do you think, apart from stigmatization?
Well, don't forget that most of the cases are asymptomatic or even mild. So people that are asymptomatic will have no need for testing. People that have mild symptoms might not see the need for testing. Then, of course, we know that there's the general, people not believing that COVID exists. A lot of people. So when you have that, you don't find the average man being convinced to get tested. Then also the cost for getting it done privately would be something that would deter a lot of people. And we know that even with the free testing that is being offered by the government, we know that there are challenges with that. It's not always immediate. So you might have to wait some days to get access to that testing, and then also wait some more days to get results. So those are some of the challenges that we're seeing regarding people offering themselves up for testing.
Regarding the, because one of the things that people have recurrently raised is the issue of manufacturing. Now that the economy is reopening itself little by little, there are fears that in some of the manufacturing, particularly the organized manufacturing sector, those with factories and so on, the issue of infection rates and the possibility of not being able to comply with protocols is very high. What would you ask that people in that position should do where we are now?
Well, I think the first thing that every organization needs to do is a risk assessment. So before they go full scale opening and commencing operation, they need to look at the environment, they need to look at the tasks that is involved in that industry, and then look at the possible threats. So things like, where is it that we cannot maintain or ensure physical distancing for our staff? Where are the places where a lot of people are gathered in crowded conditions on a normal basis? And then with that risk assessment, which ideally should be done, the employer, the manager in conjunction with the workers, then they can now start to, put some things in place or change some things around, maybe reorganize their workspace, things like ensuring those measures we always talk about, the protective measures, running water, soap, use of alcohol-based hand sanitizers, respiratory etiquette, the use of masks, and then ensuring that at least 1 meter apart, and where that cannot be, because you might not be always be able to ensure that, but at least let people have masks, and then let there be ventilation, with natural aeration being better. And then with these measures, they need to train the staff, train the managers. There needs to be training for the staff, because we know that these protective measures are there. But if you look at face masks, for example, a lot of people don't use it appropriately. And sometimes it's out of ignorance. So training is very crucial. And the manager needs to be a leader, as in, and be an exemplary leader. So the managers need to do what we expect the rest of the staff to do, and also ensure that you have things like no handshaking policies. You can stagger people's time at work. Not everybody needs to resume at the same time, ensuring that there's disinfection of common work spaces, or even limiting common gatherings in the work condition. So those are some of the things that can be done as manufacturers start working.
Thank you very much, Dr. Balogun. Thank you for that insight. We will, of course, be talking to some manufacturers right after the break and see whether they have imbibed some of the lessons that you have just imparted. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a break, and when we come back, as promised, we will be talking to representatives of the manufacturing subsector. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back to our COVID-19 update. The manufacturing industry is one sector that has successfully paired the benefits and the brunts of the COVID-19 pandemic, given the relevance of each subsector in the scheme of things. While some entities have shut down, those making efforts to stay afloat appear to be confronted by the systemic effects of the virus. Our correspondent Temple Ashaju examines in this next report how the industry has been impacted by COVID-19.
The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic across the globe has since presented the gaps in public health management the world over, as government's readiness for a virus outbreak like this has come under public scrutiny. The impacts of the pandemic, however, goes beyond the healthcare effects. There is also the significant economic impacts, which rubs off on the manufacturing industry, positively and negatively. In Nigeria, the manufacturing subsectors with upside in the pandemic are the healthcare-related and distribution firms that have been exposed to some funding opportunities from government.
We applied and we have received the money. And we're already working with the money. And the essence of the money is to expand our factory, be able to manufacture most drugs in Nigeria.
Following the implementation of the lockdown containment order of government, however, other subsectors have been severely impacted with job cuts, loan defaults, and tax liabilities.
These SMEs, they pay taxes, their employees pay payee. Why not use the payees they have been paying previously to see how you can sustain the companies to remain in production by assisting them in paying the workers?
The CBN manufacturing PMI for June 2020 stood at 41.1, indicating a contraction in the sector for the second time, just as the CEO's confidence index published by the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria settled at 44.4 points in the first quarter of the year, representing a decline from 51.9 points. With the first easing of the lockdowns and exchange rates, industrialists can only hope for better days in the second half of the year. Temple Ashaju for COVID-19 updates.
Let's go to our Abuja studios, where engineer Mansour Ahmed, who is the president of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, MAN, and interim chairman of the Pan-African Manufacturers Association, PAMA, joins us via our studios there in Abuja. Engineer Mansour Ahmed, thank you for your time this evening. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
The manufacturing sector, as that report, of course, clearly shows, has been very badly hit by this, shut for quite a long time and just slowly reopening. But the economic indices are not friendly at all. How have manufacturers been coping under the new normal, if you like?
Well, thank you very much. As your reporter has already pointed out, except for those sectors or subsectors of the manufacturing sector that were encouraged to stay afloat, like the pharmaceutical sector and some of the food and beverages sector, most of the other sectors have actually had it very difficult because the lockdown has completely stopped production in most of these sectors. So clearly the impact of COVID has been massive on the manufacturing sector. You also would be aware that the sector had not, even before COVID, had not been really as healthy as it ought to be. We were just perhaps coming out of, getting out of the low levels of performance in the fourth quarter of 2019. And then, of course, we're hit by COVID. And of course, apart from COVID, we also had some other key issues like the massive decline in foreign exchange arising from the fall in oil prices. So many of the problems of the sector were already there, and COVID has simply made it worse. Apart from the impact on the production itself, obviously there has been some significant disruption of supply chains for all the sectors, including the pharmaceutical sector. That sector, for instance, depends significantly on imported materials for its operations, particularly the active pharmaceutical ingredients, most of which were being imported either from China or India. And we know that both countries had actually suspended export of some of these materials even before COVID hit us here. So that actually compounded the problem. But again, the disruptions has not always been in terms of imports, but also even in terms of supply of materials within the country. As you are aware, the lockdown and the suspension of interstate transfers has meant significant problems for manufacturers who rely on transport of inputs such as raw materials and spare parts from one part of the country to another, particularly those relying on agricultural inputs that obviously were also affected, apart from COVID, by especially the security situation in the country. So indeed, the sector has not fared very well. And indeed, as your reporter has highlighted, our CEO confidence index between Q4 in 2019 and first quarter this year showed a significant decline from about 51.9% to just around 44%. So clearly the sector has not fared very well.
Now, there is something to be said that about what you talked about, the significant disruptions, but government has put in place what it called some interventions that are supposed to help the manufacturers. There's a 50 billion MSMEs fund, which the CBN is moderating its use for the specific purpose of the industry. There's another 15 billion, which is targeted at a number of specific sectors for intervention. So I want to ask, have these funds now been made available, or the methods of accessing them been made available to the manufacturers for the purpose of revamping or rescaling up their businesses?
Yes, we must accept and admit that both the CVN and the federal government have shown clear understanding. Apart from the 50 billion fund for the small and medium enterprises that has been put aside by the CVN, we also had a 1 trillion naira fund that is being proposed by CVN for all manufacturers. And there's another 100 billion naira for pharmaceutical manufacturers in particular. These funds have been available, and I understand from some of our members have started accessing them, but the complaints we receive is that the access to these funds is not as easy and as fast as it ought to be. So we do hope that going forward, both the CVN and the federal government will expedite the availability of these funds so that manufacturers can start to use them properly. Apart from the CVN facilities, the government's economic sustainability plan has also indicated an intention to make available significant funds to help the sector in various ways. Particularly this, we hope, will be targeted towards the development of local raw materials, the backward integration programs of many of our subsectors, and indeed the development of local content generally. So yes, the government is doing as much as it can, We know there are constraints, obviously, because government's own funding situation has changed and declined significantly. But of course, government has, of course, resorted to borrowing to fill the gap. I believe that what is important in this regard is to make sure that we put in place proper structures for delivery, for implementation of these plans, and particularly to ensure that the funds are actually reach the targets they are meant to assist. And I think if this is done, then there's a chance that we may just be able to avoid a deep depression, because as we have seen, the economy even before COVID was obviously tottering. We just in fact started to see a comeback, as it were, when in the fourth quarter we saw the GDP going to about 2.3% or 2.6%, but clearly the situation has now changed. The projection even by the Bureau of Statistics shows that we should expect significant decline, contraction in the economy during this year. Even I think the Economic Sustainability Committee has alluded to the fact that unless significant action is taken in terms of making funds available into the economy, injecting funds in the economy in various sectors, we can actually fall back into recession. And I think this is something we must try and avoid, because clearly the economy is fragile. The manufacturing sector in particular is extremely fragile, and if we are not able to sustain its operation through the COVID period and enable it to survive COVID, growth, subsequent growth may be extremely slow, and we may have a longer period of recovery than we expect.
I have just enough time to ask you one final question. Before you came on, I was talking to a public health physician who identified some of the key things that needed to be done for factories and assembly lines and so on, for manufacturers to ensure that they don't end up with infected workers in their various premises. Are you aware of any action that the manufacturers individually or as a group are taking to implement this already, even as they access all these other facilities and all these other plans for help? Are they doing things in the health sphere to ensure that their workers are safe?
Indeed. Indeed, right from the beginning, I think about February or early March, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria issued guidelines and directives to all its members to ensure that every factory that remains open does comply with the NCDC regulations and ensures that it makes available facilities for hand washing, facilities, sanitizers, and for social distancing. And I believe that the CDC itself and many other state governments have issued very clear guidelines in terms of how many people should be able to work in a particular location. Factories were asked to reduce their the number of people going into the workplaces to about 60%, and in some cases less. And there shouldn't be any congregation even at the workplace. So clearly, most of our members have been complying with these regulations. Obviously, you find one or two that may have sort of veered away from this, but we are watching, we are monitoring constantly and ensuring that our members comply with the regulations, because the health of our employees is very, very important to us.
Thank you very much, Engineer Mansour Ahmed. Thank you very much for your perspective on this. Engineer Ahmed is the president of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, as well as interim chairman of the Pan-African Manufacturers Association. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Let's go from there to the Yaba area of Lagos, where the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Modu Yusuf, joins us via Skype. Good evening to you. Thank you for your time this evening. Now, I'm sure you've listened to some of what Engineer Ahmed had already identified. So I'm going to ask separately from you, in terms of what had happened before COVID came along, which was that we were already struggling with border closures as a result of smuggling. We were already talking about high interest rates. We were talking about the need for consumer and customer purchasing power to rise. What is the situation as you have it today?
Well, the situation has worsened significantly. Just as we say about the COVID-19 patients or those who have tested positive, this is an economy that had underlying conditions. The economy has been struggling with growth before now. The level of poverty has been high. The level of unemployment has been high. And just as I said, the purchasing power had been weak even before COVID. So with the COVID experience now, or the COVID phenomenon, the situation has worsened. And not many businesses have the capacity to absorb the shock that the COVID has inflicted. See what has happened, for instance, to the exchange rate. These are some of the reflections of the impact of COVID on the macroeconomic fundamentals. Because oil is a very critical source of foreign exchange for this economy, accounting for close to 90% of forex. So with the collapse of oil price, which was as a result of the COVID collapse of demand for commodities, our reserves have come under serious pressure. The capacity to fund the foreign exchange market has been weak, and therefore exchange rate has gone very high. And because this is an economy that is highly dependent on imports, either for raw materials or for finished goods, and even in the service sector, the level of import dependence is high. So that has had a major impact on businesses across sectors of the economy. And of course, there is also the angle of the impact on the supply chain. Many of the raw materials that manufacturers use from time to time, many of the inputs, materials that some people sell, those who are in the distributive trade sector, the COVID thing has disrupted the entire supply chain. So we had a situation where many manufacturers do not get their raw materials and so on. And domestically, we also had the issue of this interstate restriction. And while that lasted, it also affected the totality of the capacity of the economy to get integrated. Because people cannot move from one state to the other to sell their goods and so on and so forth. So these are very serious challenges, but we are happy that at least government has come up with some response actions in the form of the economic sustainability plan, which is meant to be implemented within a year. So we are hoping that that will help to cushion the effect of some of these the shocks of the pandemic on the economy and on business.
Indeed, thank you very much. A comprehensive reply to my one question. Dr. Muda Yusuf, Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, joins us via Skype from Yaba area of Lagos. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
The British government has made the wearing of face masks compulsory while moving around in public spaces. This has gotten the endorsement of Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Our UK correspondent, Juliana Neal, gives us more.
Following weeks of mixed messaging from the British government about the importance of wearing a face mask, finally, an endorsement from the Prime Minister.
Just to be absolutely clear, I do think that face coverings have a real value in confined spaces, and I think the public do understand that.
Just days after this, Boris Johnson's government went much further. From next week, Friday, July the 24th, it will be mandatory for Brits to wear a face covering in shops and supermarkets in England or face a fine of £100.
In recent weeks, we've reopened retail and footfall is rising. We want to give people more confidence to shop safely and enhance protections for those who work in shops. Both of these can be done by the use of face coverings. Sadly, sales assistants, cashiers and security guards have suffered disproportionately in this crisis. The death rate of sales and retail assistants is 75% higher amongst men and 60% higher amongst women than in the general population. We've therefore come to the decision that face coverings should be mandatory in shops and supermarkets. Last month, we made face coverings mandatory on public transport and in NHS settings. This has been successful in giving people more confidence to go on public transport and to a hospital setting when they need to.
The opposition Labour Party have called the U-turn slow and muddled. One Tory MP described it as a monstrous imposition that would make him less likely to go shopping. It's that analysis that will worry the Prime Minister. Yesterday's GDP figures showing a month-on-month growth of 1.8% in May were underwhelming to say the least. Britain is heading into its worst recession in 300 years. For now, though, the focus is avoiding a second peak in infections. Whilst welcoming clarity over the issue, Shop Workers' Union said covering should not be a substitute for strict hygiene controls and social distancing measures. Juliana Olayinka, reporting for Channels TV News in London.
Let's talk to Juliana Neal, who joins us from the British capital via Skype. Good evening, Juliana. Thank you for your time and for your reporting. So we're having more or less the same kind of arguments that we've had here, so to speak. Already there is opposition to the compulsory wearing of face masks.
Good evening, Laddie. There is opposition, and it appears as if the opposition for the government isn't just coming within the House of Commons, it's coming from the British people. For the past 8 weeks, Britain have been going backwards and forwards about whether or not people should wear face masks, and it appears as if, according to recent data, the government have decided that, yes, indeed, they can protect you from COVID-19. Boris Johnson last week was the first senior government minister to endorse wearing face masks. He went into a shop and bought a bright blue face mask, which you obviously saw in the report. But the issue that the government is having is that the mixed messaging amongst senior cabinet members is still continuing. Michael Gove, a senior cabinet minister, was on the media saying that people shouldn't wear face masks. Matt Hancock, the health secretary, says they shouldn't be compulsory in offices or takeaways. So it appears to be a little bit of a joke, to be honest with you. We have had a tweet from the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who was one of the earlier advocates for wearing face masks. And he said the government are being utterly ridiculous. Why ask people to wear face masks from the 24th of July, which is next Friday? Why not bring that forward? Why should you not wear them in a takeaway, but you should wear them in a shopping centre? To be honest with you, Laddie, it's a complete mess.
I agree. It does look that way. But one thing that it appears as if everybody is agreed on is that things are difficult economically, and more is needed to be done. What's the update on that?
Well, Britain is indeed heading into a really serious and deep recession. They have been heralded around the world for this furlough scheme, which is pretty world-leading. Earlier in March, the Chancellor said that he would be paying for all staff working from home their wages. So the government over the past couple of months have been paying people to stay at home, and it's cost them over £9 billion. There have already been mass redundancies from the airlines, from much of the hospitality sector. And the concern is that when this furlough scheme tapers off in October, and that people just won't be asking employers to come back to work. So that's a major concern. Unemployment, it's currently at 3.9%, expected to rise to 13%. We also have various issues with the OECD, the Office for Budget Responsibility, saying that the government is borrowing too much and they will have to put up taxes just to prevent the absolute crippling of the economy. Just lastly, I'll add that, yes, there was month-on-month growth from April to May, 1.8% growth of GDP, but we've still lost a quarter of the worth of the economy since this lockdown, and it's a heavily reliant industry of the hospitality sector.
In just a minute, could you just update us on the situation with international travel? Because we're hearing mixed messages on that front. Are people now allowed to get into Britain without the 14-day quarantine, or what exactly is the situation in that?
I don't believe that is the case. I think the new measure, the government did another U-turn last week after much lobbying from the airline industry. In fact, IAG, the British Airways owner, took the government to court. But yes, as you said very quickly, Brits are able to go on holiday and come back and not quarantine, but that's only if you're a British resident, and there are only a number of destinations on that list. So you can fly if a border is open, but if you want to not quarantine on your return to Britain, it must be on the designated list, and you must make sure that you're wearing a face mask when you get into the airport.
All right, then. Thank you very much, Juliana, for your reporting today, and do continue to stay safe out there.
Thank you.
7,021 South African police officers are among those testing positive for COVID-19, 53 of whom have died. 4,949 of them have been quarantined in the capital, Pretoria, while 150 others have been hospitalized. The country, that is South Africa, has recorded 298,292 cases of COVID-19 so far and is set to hit the 300,000 mark, in spite of a swiftly imposed lockdown aimed at preventing infections spiraling as they did in the West. Here's our global update.
Moderna says its experimental vaccine for COVID-19 showed it was safe and provoked immune responses in all 45 healthy volunteers in the ongoing early stages of the study. No study volunteers experienced a serious side effect, but more than half reported mild or moderate reactions such as fatigue, headache, chills, muscle aches, or pain at the injection site. The company is the first to start human testing of a vaccine for the novel coronavirus on March 16th. Over in Russia, scientists have hailed the results of their first clinical trial of a potential coronavirus vaccine, saying it had proven safe and that volunteers had developed an immune response. 3 of the 18 volunteers monitored over a month at the Sechenov University said they all had experienced few side effects.
Prime Minister, not only are we getting on...
In the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson fiercely defended his government's preparation for a potential second spike of the pandemic during the Prime Minister's questions in Parliament today.
To Yorkshire visit Nuzshah.
In Spain, some 160,000 people in the region of Catalonia have gone back into confinement as authorities scramble to control a fresh surge of infections in the area. And Belgium has postponed a further easing of rules on social gatherings after an uptick in the number of COVID-19 infections. And the Prime Minister says she cannot rule out the reintroduction of lockdowns in the areas worst affected. Finally, Hong Kong officials have advised residents to stay indoors after the city recorded its 9th COVID-19 related death. The new rules make face masks mandatory for people on public transport, and restaurants will no longer provide dine-in services and only offer takeaway after 6 p.m.
For more on the COVID-19 pandemic and other local and international stories, do visit our website, channelstv.com, where you'll find details of how, for example, the governor of Oklahoma in the United States contracted COVID-19. The WHO website, that's the World Health Organization, is there to get the timeline of the world body's response to the pandemic and how more than 150 countries are engaged in the COVID-19 vaccine global access facility. That's our COVID-19 update tonight. I'm Ladi Akiridoluale. Good night.